and the usefulness of the results we present here. In terms of developing countries, I think that the policy implications are very straightforward. In utero conditions are very, very important. The biological consequences for brain development are huge. And the cost of providing, not the bureaucratic cost, but the actual cost of providing those micronutrients should be minuscule compared to the benefits that individuals can accrue in the long run. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Professor. We're pretty much out of time, so I was thinking let's go to the classrooms first, take one question each if there are any questions there, and I'll come back here.
One second.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Huh? Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, my name is Santosh Kumar. I'm from Sam Houston. And my question is, there's a separate literature on birth weight. So birth weight as initial health endowment in itself is an important determinant of long-term cognitive outcomes or educational outcomes. So would it be nice to include birth weight in your main model on the right-hand side as exogenous variable?
Birth weight on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
But birth weight is endogenous. You cannot put birth weight on the right-hand side. That's an outcome. It's affected by the treatment of interest. Could be. So we don't find an effect, but still, it's not something that I would do, but perhaps we should just look at the correlation and put it on the right-hand side. Yeah, maybe we should try that. But there is ample of evidence from other studies about the correlation between birth weight and the educational longer-term outcome. So there'll be no contribution from our point of view on establishing such a positive correlation. That's already well established in the literature, I think, but we should actually, just for the sake of seeing how our data behave in terms of that correlation, do the same. Thanks. That's a good idea. We'll do it.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we go to the other classroom? Just let me finish with there are two classrooms, and I'll come back to you.
No more questions from room number 13 and 14.
Okay, great. So,
one question I was going to ask was, in developing countries, because of mother's nutritional status, they don't carry the baby to full term like we would expect in this country. If that's the case, the classification of the trimester, first trimester might be slightly off, and I was wondering whether you tried dropping the first 4 weeks or something from the first trimester, just shifting and checking whether you still find the effect or not.
We did, and there are evidence with alternative tables when we drop 2 weeks and 4 weeks,
okay,
and we look at that.
Okay.
So there are tables in the paper, yeah.
I'm actually going to go back to my stress idea. So, to the stress idea. So, okay. In some sense, I would be curious to know what is the proportion of mothers who actually knew that they were pregnant in this first trimester part, because it could be the case that that people who did not know that they were pregnant were not stressed out about their children, whereas those who already knew that they were pregnant and they were in the second and third, with whatever, it may be a sudden airlift, but it was not a sudden political situation. I mean, things were going worse. Yeah. So you could expect that they would be more stressed, and some of the results could come from that.
Yeah, so not knowing that you are pregnant is a source of differential stress effect. There are several recent papers looking at stress effect during pregnancy related to violence and terrorist actions and things like that. Some studies, some effect, some studies find no effect. The effects that are found are small. So I cannot rule your idea completely. I think it's something that we should worry about. We do worry about. We discuss it in the paper. Not much more than that, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, my question is more about the last part of your paper, so I'm convinced by the in utero story, but it's more about the translation of cognitive abilities into economic outcomes in adult life. And I'm asking out of ignorance, so in Israel, is there no racial discrimination? Because if there is, or does Jewish identity triumph racial differences? Because if there would be, then the ability of individuals to transform their human capital capital into occupational outcomes is limited by who they are, what their social identity might be.
There are no racial differences in terms of admission to post-secondary schooling institutions.
But in terms of wages or job outcomes?
Well, the evidence I presented is based on the Ethiopian sample. It doesn't, we have similar correlations for the non-Ethiopian samples. They're a bit different, but not dramatically different. But they are different because the outcomes are at a higher level. But this is based only on the Ethiopian population. So the potential gains that I'm suggesting are based on the Ethiopian population. Well, if you'll invite me in 5 years, I'll present a paper with earnings and post-secondary schooling outcome on this population.
So just one last question, Sonia, and then we can continue the discussion over tea.
Okay. I actually have 3, but I'll just say them as 3 very quick points. So the first is about why there are no birth weight effects, but there are cognitive effects. Even if there were very small differences in birth endowments between treated and control, if these small differences in endowments attracted differences in complementary investments, reinforcing investments, they could lead to large differences later on. So you would expect to see larger differences between treatment and control measured further along, which is the case with the school outcomes.
So let me understand. Saying that there could be intra-household compensatory investment that would enhance the outcomes of those who had lower birth rate?
No, so actually not at all that. So I'm not thinking, it may be intra-household, but I'm not thinking of intra-household. Simply that children born with slightly better birth weight, or just better health endowments that might not be reflected in birth weight, would attract reinforcing investments. And so the idea is just that if there are
20 grams difference that are not significant, are they meaningful differences that would attract something like the one you're suggesting?
Either that, or equally, birth weight may not pick up, and we know doesn't pick up all facets of the birth endowment.
Right.
So whatever differences in birth endowment there were, some of which we don't observe, if they attracted complementary investments, could lead to the effects enlarging over time. So observing bigger differences later on is consistent with dynamic complementarity.
Okay.
Also, somewhat related, why girls and not boys? You've argued that there's a literature suggesting that girls are more sensitive to iron or iodine in utero, but they could also be more sensitive to school inputs. And the school inputs could be endogenous to these birth effects related to what I said.
Yeah, because they are exposed to the same
But they
schooling
could be
later
more-
on, unless
They could
there's
be more
differential treatment
sensitive.
based on the outcomes that we observe. I'm not sure the school would observe, but perhaps some other
Yeah, but
proxies of that.
it's the beta, just being more sensitive to school inputs, not having more school inputs.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Do we have evidence that girls are more sensitive to school inputs? I'm not familiar with that.
Well, I have
I
some
think
evidence that they do more homework after an early life health shock.
Yeah. We have evidence that kids from lower SES are very more sensitive to school inputs than kids from more advantaged families. But girls and boys, in terms like my work on school inputs on various dimensions, find almost no gender differences in terms of class size or instructional time or teachers' incentives or computers in the classroom. Or the only thing we found more sensitive is students' bonuses. This paper with Joshua Angris that affect girls and not boys. That could be.
And the third is whether there might have been selection into pregnancy as a function of the timing of political events in Ethiopia. So there was the actual movement was sudden, but like Abhirup was saying earlier, there was a process prior to the airlift.
So
So
how
there
that-
might be selection into pregnancy, certain types. I
So
don't
that,
know
but
what was
that
happening.
works actually. Oops, I'm not going to touch this. That type of selection would actually induce more stress for a mother who got pregnant just before departure, before the rebels were actually converging into Addis Ababa. So that would work against finding an effect. It means that the mothers who, your selection suggestion is that mothers who were at early digestion, early pregnancy before they depart to Israel had more stress, or it was more selective, and that if the selection was negative, then it's against finding an effect, unless the selection was positive
Yeah.
for some
So I don't
reason.
know if it was negative or positive, because if, yeah, yeah,
You
but
could be concerned about your child, or you could be concerned that you're in a stressful
Yeah.
environment. So
Yeah.
But what I was thinking is the type of woman who became pregnant 9 months before versus 6 months before would depend on whether conditions were worse 9 months before or 6 months before,
Yeah.
which I don't know.
Okay, that's a good point.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Lavy. Thank
Sure.
you very much. And
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.